Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for episode number 48 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, and also episode number 3 of our top 50 YouTube, top 50 games of all time. Today we're going over games 30 to 21. Yeah, that's it. How are you guys feeling so far about your lists?
I think it's fun, like you mentioned in the last episode, that it only gets better.
Right.
Yeah.
It is hard to be, as mean as I can be when we're just sort of getting to the best of the best.
Right.
So it is squashing my potential, maybe a little bit.
If you can't be mean, then what are you, Kellen?
Exactly.
Exactly.
So let's dive right in.
I'll start us off with number 30. My number 30 game is Grand Austria Hotel. This is a dice drafting game of hotel management. So you sort of have a classic mechanic, board game mechanic. It's my favorite hotel management game that I've played at least.
Dishwasher, the game.
Right. So everyone has a hotel, and there are guests that sort of filter in on these cards, and each of these guests have different requirements in terms of food that you need to procure to them while they're in this sort of the lobby, the waiting area of your hotel. So you roll a bunch of dice at the beginning of each round. Each of these dice is allocated to certain actions. And then you take a die from that corresponding action, and then that either produces food, or you might be serving that food to one of your customers. And then once that their food requirements are met, then you need to find a room for them. So you have to be opening rooms as well. There's also sort of a spatial component to, like, the rooms you open in certain rows are worth certain points. So as you move towards the top end of your hotel, you're getting more and more points. It's a really, really fun game. It's kind of unique like that. I don't know if there are many hotel management board games. And the dice drafting is really fun. I think it's one of those games that I think runs long at the full count of players. So this is another one I would probably do. It works really, really well at 2 players. So 2 or 3 would be my optimal count for this. That's Grand Austria Hotel.
Not sure why I was making fun of the theme, because that's actually why I want to try this game.
Right.
I've always just been strangely intrigued by it, even though I think there's a pretty plain Euro hidden underneath.
Right.
Cool. My number 30th best game of all time is Startups. This is a Oink filler card game that I just can't get enough of. It starts with the incredible artwork. I won't even begin to describe it because I wouldn't know what style it is, but there's sort of a couple of different companies, Octo Coffee, Bow Wow Games, and they're basically different startup corporations that you're investing in. But what's so intriguing about the game is that once you put a investment into one of the companies out on the board, you get the anti-monopoly chip, which none of this makes thematic sense, but you are then not allowed to publicly take any face up of those cards as you're drawing from the draw pile. So you actually are prohibited from participating in that company unless you just blind draw it. So you're trying to hide your cards that are part of a company so that you are sort of chasing someone else who is also investing in the same company. Because if they put one out, they get that monopoly chip. You put one out, you don't. You're not restricted in the same way that they are.
Right.
And what's interesting is at the end of a round, you pay out only on the companies that you own some stocks in, but aren't the majority leader. So basically, the 2 people who are competing over Bow Wow, they know that one of the 2 of them is going to pay to the other person.
Right.
And that's what's so funny and silly about this game. It's very simple. Pick up a card, play a card style game that just has more to it than you'd expect when you open the box. It's beautiful. I would take it anywhere with me. That is Startups by Oink Games.
I really like Startups a lot. That whole thing about if you go into a battle with somebody, the stakes are increased because one person's going to be a big loser, one person's going to be a big winner.
Yeah.
So my number 30. So my number 31 was Codenames, which is a light sort of party game. My number 30 is quite the opposite. This is Pax Renaissance by Phil Eklund, he of Pax and Bios games. This is a incredibly dense card game. All it amounts to is something like 80 cards. There's a couple of pieces, but not very many. And the entire board is made up of cards, but it's very, very dense. One of the sources of that density is the flavor text. I usually bypass flavor text. Don't really care. But when it comes to Pax Renaissance, the text is so dense. I mean, people have compared this to like a college level lesson on the Renaissance. It's like there's so much in it. I'm a big history buff, so I just like, people. There's a lot of consideration in this game because it is so heavy and so dense. So sometimes there's a little bit of people taking time to take their turn, which I don't mind in this game because I'll just read my cards. Like it's just like learning about the history of these characters and these like events is just I love it. So there's a lot to explain, but basically what it is, the core mechanic of the game is actually the same as like Century Spice Road, where you're drafting cards, but if you want cards down the row, you have to pay more and more for them. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to, it's really considered like a simulation of the Renaissance, although obviously like things take place in different ways, but there are a number of ways to win. There's like a military way to win or to like achieve. There's economic, there's like even religious and trade. There's just a lot going on, and it just feels so epic. It feels like you are like a big family in the Renaissance. You're marrying, people to gain alliances. You're building trade routes. You're like religions are coming into strength and out of favor. It's just so deep and rich. And I guess rich is a big word. Just again, how much, and these are standard cards, how much is on there is fantastic. And actually, there's a lot to it in terms of strategy, but really the way the game plays is much more straightforward than it bites sound. You're only taking 2 actions every turn, and the actions are pretty straightforward. So if you're looking for just like a rich experience, and just really, if you just want something that if you get bored, you can just pull them out and read the cards. If you're a history fan, PAX Renaissance, I would highly recommend it. It's my number 30 game.
Is this your favorite PAX game?
Yeah.
That's cool. I've been wanting to try one of these, so this seems like the one I should do.
Yes, I think universally people would say PAX Renaissance is the best.
Very cool. My number 29 game is Azul. Azul, I think, sort of took the world by storm a little bit. It's been doing extremely well for what is there? Plan B, yeah. This is a game of sort of drafting mosaic tiles to sort of create like a grid on your board that will score points based on how many tiles you place in a corresponding row or column. And then at the end of the game, if you get sets of the same color or any number of rows you fill, the columns, that will also get you additional points at the end of the game. But the chief mechanic is there are these factories in the middle, and each of them has 4 tiles on them that sort of redistribute every round. And you're going to pick one of those factories and pick all of the tiles of the same color. So you keep going until these factories are emptying, and then anything remaining on those factories goes towards this pool in the middle. So every round plays out until every single tile is drawn, and you're always taking every tile of that color from that pool. So you can get to a point towards the end of a round where you're forced to take 6 tiles of a color, but you're limited in the places you can play them. So you might end up with negative points if they spill over to sort of like the negative pool. So there are these sort of, there's this element of sort of like playing the table and sort of trying to figure out, well, if I take this now, am I going to be the one that will have to take the bad pool at the end? Right. Picking something before someone else gets it, or very, cursorily glancing at someone else's board. They desperately need this specific color, so I want to make sure that they don't get it or get too many of it. So it's a pretty interactive for what is a tile puzzle game, effectively.
Yeah, abstract.
For a pretty abstract game, exactly. I really like Azul. I think maybe sort of my impressions of it were extremely strong initially, and are sort of maybe waning a little bit, but it's still it's a really strong game that I would recommend. It's easy to teach and explain. The scoring is maybe a little fiddly, but it's good.
As I'm saying this, I'm sort of reconsidering it, but for some reason it feels like next to Codenames the most like universally classic feeling game. I don't know if that's correct or not. I just feel like it's an abstract, which lends itself to like, I think like that sort of thing, and it's pretty straightforward to teach. I don't know. I feel like it's a game you can pull out with most people.
I could certainly see myself taking this one to the family to play. Like it's maybe
it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. These tiles are these little thick plastic tiles. Yeah. Like if you imagine like sort of Scrabble tile dimensions, but like thick and glossy, and they're it's such a cool looking production.
Yeah.
Once again, Neelan rolling those.
Yeah, rolling the tiles through my
holding
fingers.
Them.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so
and they
strange.
clack together so beautifully. Oh man, Azul. That's my number 29.
My number 29 best game of all time is Imperial 2030. This is a big one. Who designed this?
Mac Gertz.
Mac Gertz. So there's a rondelle in it.
Yeah.
That much I know. I can make a rondelle joke. But Imperial 2030 is sort of my Risk replacement in my mind. But what's so cool about Imperial 2030 is that you only control a company. You only control a country slash company until you don't. So you sort of think when you start a game of Imperial 2030, you're thinking in terms of, okay, this is my country, this is my position, and you can lose ownership of that country entirely, and then it gets sent into the ground. So you're actually playing an investor who is sort of just trying to make the most money amidst war. It's a very cynical, very, very cynical outlook, but you essentially can occasionally have multiple countries, and then you're deliberately just using one to sort of pump money into your other country. But at no point do you care about the people that are involved in these massive, huge wars on the board. Extremely interactive. We've had a ton of fun playing this one, and one that I don't play enough but need to play more because there's a lot of depth to it. Really, really cool game.
I love it.
Yeah, I would love to do this again.
Yeah,
it was
for sure.
Great.
Very unique. That's Imperial 2030. There is also a different themed non-2030 version. I'm not sure when it's set in the past, but maybe Mark would prefer
I think
that.
it's like a.
You can look up.
I think it might be like a railroady sort of thing called Imperial. I forget what
You could look up Wikipedia articles like while the game's going to sort of read up
Right.
Oh, yeah,
about
yeah,
the
yeah.
history.
Right. No, I would appreciate
That's
that.
legitimate.
Yeah, that's completely legit.
Got it. That is Imperial 2030.
My number 29 was mentioned earlier by Neelan. This is Kemet. Dudes on a map action selection game. As he mentioned, the thing I like the most about it, I like confrontation in my games, especially my dude on the map sort of games. And I love the fact that, this game goes up to like 8 or 10 points, depending if you're playing short or long. And you get a victory point for initiating and winning a battle. I love that. It takes away all, like you mentioned earlier, that hesitancy. Like, I don't want to be the guy who attacks first, and it sort of disincentivizes turtling, obviously, because, people are going to come after you because it's the way to score points. I really do like the tech tree. I like the fact that the tech tree, there's different flavors. There's like an attacking tech, there's like a defensive one, and there's an other. And I like the fact that you can draft different ways to score, or you can draft buffs, or you can draft characters. You can draft like a scorpion.
Oh yeah, we didn't mention the giant monsters, which are these nice little minis.
So like the tech tree is not just of one flavor; it's multiple. It's like nuanced and interesting that way. I just love that you can get in everybody's face, and you're encouraged to get in everybody's face from the beginning.
And like I said before, you're never a turn or two away from just being right up on someone.
Yeah, you can never feel safe, and you can never feel like somebody's too far for you to get out. It's been said, but number 29 for me is Kemet. Okay,
my number 28 is Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. This is a fantastic social deduction game that I think veers lighter. Like, I could see myself explaining this to most people, and then again, there'll always be that initial wonky round, but you'll get over it and it'll be great from the second play on. The way this works is every player has two sort of rows of 4 cards, one which corresponds to a murder weapon, one which corresponds to evidence left of the scene, except for one player who is the forensic scientist. Is that right?
Yes.
Forensic investigator, perhaps. And they are the sort of clue giver for the table. They're trying to lead the other players towards one of the players who they secretly know is a murderer. So the murderer will sort of, once they've identified themselves as the murderer, everyone closes their eyes. The murderer points to their murder weapon of their 4 cards and their evidence of their other 4 cards. The forensic scientist knows this and is then trying to lead the other players to those 2 cards by these clue cards. So it might be, what is the time of day? What is the location? What was sort of the atmosphere at the time? Were there any witnesses? That sort of thing. And just by using these subtle clues, you're trying to get them towards these certain cards. The murderer is participating in all the discussion and obviously trying to lead people astray, saying, oh, it's not me, it's Mark. He's clearly trying to tell us it's the scissors and the poison.
Right.
And, so it's a game that sort of revolves around pure discussion and just, trying to rally people to your way of thinking, trying to convince people that you're not the murderer. And it gets especially good when you layer in some of these roles, like someone that might be helping out the murderer. So you suddenly have 2 people that are like pushing for something specific and you don't exactly know why, because it doesn't quite make sense, but they're vehemently arguing that it does make sense. It's a really clever game. It's one I like a lot. I like playing it as on both sides, being just a grunt police officer, being the forensic scientist, being the murderer, all equally satisfying. It's really, really good. That's Deception, Murder in Hong Kong.
I've actually had a lot of success teaching this to non-gamers.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, we always run it back and have a good time. The one issue I sort of have with this, and what reason it dropped a little bit on my list, is I feel like, when the murderer is selecting his weapon and clue, it really, even if he's trying to be as sort of opaque as possible, it really only comes down to generally like 2 or 3 possibilities
Actual
on the table.
options.
And so
yeah.
it gets like the choice of who the murderer are, it gets like thinned down quite early, and it's like
it feels like sometimes you can just wholesale rule out some players like
exactly.
almost immediately.
Right.
That's fair.
Yeah, but great game for sure, definitely.
Cool. My number 28 best game of all time is a Fake Artist Goes to New York.
Yeah.
This is essentially almost a parlor game, activity. This is another Oink game, so I have Oink games on the mind for this episode. But in this game, everyone knows a word, but one player. That word could be shark or swimming pool, or any number of things. And then every player is passing around a pad of paper, and they can only add one line to the drawing. So you put your pencil down, you draw, and then you lift up, and that gets passed around the table 2 times. So the funny part about this is one player doesn't know that they're trying to draw a swimming pool, and then everyone else is trying to figure out who doesn't know. So everyone has a different color pencil, or depending on the version of the game you get, there's a couple different variations of this. And then you're sitting there analyzing after the round, and everyone is trying to figure out who the fake artist is. This is hysterical because the first few rounds with a new group, everyone will be way too obvious about what they're drawing with one line.
Right.
And then the fake artist will get away with it. But as the game goes on, people start getting sillier and sillier with what they're drawing to try to distract the fake artist. So their drawing just needs to be just good enough to convince the others, like, I clearly knew what I was doing. Look at that squiggly squaggle,
Right.
And so once again, it devolves into a shouting match where everyone is sort of trying to prove that they aren't the bad guy. Super simple. Love A Fake Artist Goes to New York. Have never had a bad time playing this.
Yeah, I really like Fake Artists. It's one of my favorites especially of the Oink games. But yeah, again, another game that you can bring to a party and always go off well.
It's fun.
All right, my number 28 gets a lot of grief. All the negative stuff, though, I think comes from the whole form over function part of it. I don't know. But the negatives come down to it's a very drab board. The pieces are not super high quality. But for me, it's the best. It's the most points, the best point salad game from Mr. Point Salad.
Just tell us what it is.
Castles of Burgundy, number 28. I think it's his best game as far as the point salad part goes, and I think it's his best game. It's my favorite of the Feld games. This is all about point salad, all about getting points in different places, all about building your engines, your various engines. It's a very simple game in terms of the way you play. You're basically rolling 2 dice the same way you do in Oracles of Delphi, and you can take actions based on the dice you roll. There's a way to mitigate it, same as Oracle of Delphi. It's got just like everything you sort of want from a Feldian game. The set collection, a bunch of different ways to score points. Yes, the board is drab. It's like various shades of brown. You might get a green sprinkled in if you're lucky. But yeah, I think if you're looking for the prototypical point salad, the prototypical Feld, you go Castles of Burgundy, and it's ridiculous. It's like less than $25 on Amazon. It's hard to pass up if you're looking for that.
I don't know why exactly. It just didn't do anything for me the couple of times I played it. Like I on paper it feels like it would be a game I would like, and I feel like a lot of people have recommended to me as a game I would like. I
even get that the aesthetic part alone is enough to turn people off.
I don't think it was that. I mean, that's certainly
part of it. Right.
It's not a good looking game, but I don't think that would have been enough.
Yeah. Is this the one where everyone has a different numbered board that they're working off of, or is everyone using the same number in each game?
You can use different boards. You can use the same board, or you can use different boards. Yeah.
What's the most common
way to play? I think probably different. Like gamers will probably play like the asymmetrical boards, but
Yeah, I had this and got rid of it, and I seem to remember sort of for something so tight, Euro-y, feeling like the boards didn't always have the same like point potential on them. I don't know. I haven't played it nearly enough.
And well, certainly as the tiles are come out, you're basically, one of the things you can do is buy tiles, or I guess it's the main action you're doing is buying tiles and putting them on your tableau or your board. And sometimes, especially if you're working on a animal strategy or you're working on, whatever strategy, like a shipping strategy, the way the tiles can come out, they're always the same type of tiles that come out, but sometimes the look of the draw on the tiles can go south for you. But again, there's so many ways to score, because this is a point salad, that there's always a way to like mitigate. So that's Castles of Burgundy, number 28.
My number 27 game is Coloretto. Really simple card game, easy to teach and always just really fun. Kellen and I sort of spoke about this recently as it's a game that you just compare every other small card game to, because it's for like how simple it is and how satisfying the decisions are, and it's really good. The way it works is you have a deck of just a number of cards in different colors, and that's all the cards are just a color. You're trying to collect groups of cards to score as many points as possible. Depending on how the scoring system you work, there are two different scoring systems. You're either trying to hit a certain number or just get as many of that card as possible. Then one by one, you sort of draw a card and choose one of a number of different sort of hops to play it to. And those sort of hops can only have 3 cards total each. So you get to a point where you're either going to add it to be the third card in one hop, or sort of start a new hop, or at any point instead of playing a card, you can just take one of the hops. So it's this very cool decision of like, well, I could sort of push my luck a little bit and sort of get a card that I might want to put somewhere that might be the card I need, but then might have to put it somewhere where it's suddenly very enticing for someone else to take immediately, or just sort of cash in and just take the cards that are there on the table right now. It's, like I said, for a simple game, it's just got got a cool decision space. It's really, really fun. So easy to teach. It's Coloretto.
Yeah, I think one of the things you can look at is these games that have been expanded and sort of iterated on as Zularetto,
right,
as Aquaretto, and a few others. And then we inevitably always end up back at the simplest version of that, the pure version of what the game is. And what's intriguing is just, there's 3 hops here, and you can either take one or add a card to one of those arrays, and that's the game.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I sort of, Zularetto was the first version of that I played, and then once I played Coloretto, I had the exact same reaction. It's like, wait, this is the part I like. Why am I doing all that other stuff? Yeah.
Cool. We are moving on to my 27th best game of all time, and I believe I can say with a surety that this is the last cooperative game on my list. Okay. This is Hanabi, the granddaddy of them all. It's
not the granddaddy of cooperative games.
I meant of all board games.
Oh, okay. And strange that you're 27. Yeah.
Interesting. Hanabi is a cooperative game where everyone doesn't get to see their own cards. So you're literally drawing from a deck and displaying them outwards towards everyone else at the table. This alone makes it really, really funny as people play for the first time and they sort of go, what? Like, this is how you play? And you are playing cards onto ascending piles of fireworks, trying to go from 1 to 5. And you're giving each other clues about your cards. So on your turn, you can either give a clue to a neighbor or play one of your cards. And there's a lot of trust involved in this game, because if you're almost out of clues to give and no one has given you clues about your cards, you have to sort of make a leap of faith and say, well, that means I have bad cards. I can just discard these. But that isn't always what it means. Sometimes people just aren't paying attention to what you have. Or you could see a big problem coming up. If you don't give a clue between the two of them, you're going to lose a card that you need in order to successfully complete the game. This is a game where you just play to 25 points. There's a few ways to plus up the difficulty with sort of a rainbow suit. The way in which you give clues is really simple. You can either tell someone how many of a card they have. You have 3 ones in your hand, and here they are, or you have 3 blue cards, and here they are. But you have to give all. You can't give like a partial clue. You either give clues in those 2 flavors. This is Hanabi. It has always been a fantastic success. I feel like I'm improving at it with different groups of people, and then you start over and sort of a new meta develops with a new group, which is fun.
Yeah, it's a great game. Packs a lot of punch in a deck of cards, basically.
The granddaddy of them all.
I like when you're teaching new people and you're explaining that the cards are like reverse of how they normally be, and then there's always the part where somebody acts like they're so natural they take the card the wrong way. Yeah, or which is the right way, I guess. All right, my number 27. Look who's back! It's the Doctor again. This is his newest game, and if Decrypto 2018.
Decrypto 2018.
Okay, so this is the third of 4 2018 games on my list. This is his reworking of Through the Desert. It is Blue Lagoon. I love this game, despite the fact that I am absolutely terrible at it. It's so frustrating that I'm so bad at it, but I love it so much. I just always want to run it back immediately every time I lose. So what this is again a reworking of Through the Desert, which was sort of loosely based on Go. You're creating routes or networks, and you're trying to in this game specifically, you're creating routes. You're trying to create routes that touch all islands. It's one of the ways to score. You're also trying to cut off your opponent's ability to create those routes. Blue Lagoon differs from Through the Desert in that it adds a little more gaminess to it, a little more like ways to score points. Through the Desert was much more of like a pure Go-ish type of game. But I love Blue Lagoon. I love what it adds. It's got 2 halves, which really basically amount to the same game twice. There's a little bit of a difference between the first half and the second half of the game, but I just love it. Again, another game that's like simple in its rules. There's a little more fiddliness than most Knizia games in terms of scoring because there's so many different ways to score. But for me, it doesn't hurt it at all. I absolutely love this game. 27 Blue Lagoon.
I may have played this more than any other game in 2018. I don't have any 2018 games on my list. Maybe Decrypto's up there, but that's it.
Yeah.
Blue Lagoon's great. I've played it a lot in quick succession.
Yeah.
And I just am starting to wonder if it has the legs for me.
Oh, really?
But still loving it. Still would recommend it to everybody. I've played it a lot. So
yeah.
I love Blue Lagoon too. We will come back to that. My number 26 game is Spirit Island. This is I was trying to think like how many cooperative games I have on my list, but this is probably one of the highest ones. Spirit Island is a like I said, a cooperative game where each player has one of a bunch of different asymmetric spirits. There's an island whose natives you're trying to protect as spirits of this island, and invaders come in, and they're represented by these plastic pieces, these plastic components. The invaders sort of come in based on a deck of cards. They're going to move into the island, build buildings, and start spreading out. And you, as the spirits, are trying to just repel them. So you have these pans of powers, some of which sort of act faster than the invaders do, some of which are more about setting up for the subsequent round. You're collecting energy, and it's about sort of like it's a hand management game where you're sort of managing the cards, deciding the right time to play them, because you at some point need to retrieve them all so you can play them for a future round. You're sort of trying to push invaders around the board, move them off, and they sort of just keep coming up back and back in sort of bigger and bigger numbers in this very pandemic way where it starts to sort of feel like it's going out of control. But one of the best things about this game is that it has this power curve over the course of it. You're getting stronger and stronger because you're sort of drafting better and better power cards. So eventually you get to this point where it feels overwhelming, but you just have enough push to be able to do these big moves to sort of get enough of them off the board and win the game. I really, really like this a lot. It's a very heavy, very thinky cooperative game that seems to, just by virtue of how heavy it is and sort of how hard it is to sort of think of anyone's board state outside of your own, it's hard to sort of quarterback the table. Yeah. And you're sort of mostly focusing on what you're able to do, but there is a pretty strong interaction in saying, okay, let's work together. I don't know what you're going to be able to do, but can you help me out over here? Can you maybe help me out on this part of the board? It's really, really cool, really satisfying, and I've had a lot of really good games of this. And also, just because of that asymmetry, every spirit feels pretty fundamentally different. Like the rules are quite substantially different between each of the spirits. So
Yeah.
that's it's a strong game for like from a replayability perspective.
I love the asymmetry is great. I also love the names of the guys.
Yeah.
They're really, really cool.
Right.
One of the biggest problems for me when it comes to co-ops is a quarterbacking thing. You feel like basically one person or two people are really playing the game. A lot of people are just bystanders, but this does a good job of mitigating that for sure.
I don't co-op, but I really understand why people like this. And if I was looking for mid to heavyweight co-op experiences, this is definitely like a premier title that you should consider. Right. My number 26 best game of all time is Cockroach Poker, or otherwise known as Kakerlaken-Spiel. Is that what we call it? I don't know. Oh, no, Spiel's probably just the only.
Spiel's not
Kakerlaken something.
Yeah.
Cockroach Poker is a fantastic bluffing game where you hand a player a card and you say this is a cockroach, and then they have to decide whether they believe you or not. That is essentially the whole game. Only one player loses. But what's funny is you can then hand that card to another player. So this is a spider, Mark. Mark says, I believe you, picks it up.
I would never say that, by the way.
And then hands it to Nealon and says, Kellen's a filthy liar. It's a stink bug. And then as that passes around, you kind of get a vibe for who's lying and who's not lying. And you kind of use the players as well to know, well, Christina doesn't usually lie. And you're trying to discern who is good at lying and who is not. What I love about the game, too, is that there's only one loser. So essentially, once you draw a card that you know will be bad for Mark, it's sort of a mission to how to get that card to Mark.
Yeah.
So you don't want to pass it to him first because then he can just get rid of it. It needs to go to Mark last.
Yeah.
And then he needs to hear a bunch of stuff about how it's not what he thinks it is. And then he's going to get got. And that is Cockroach Poker. Very fun. And this one, I know the game that it's always compared to is Skull. And over the years, I now firmly prefer Cockroach Poker over Skull, personally.
So are all the suits, I forget, are all the suits in this game bugs?
Yes.
And one of the suits is a
wait,
spider.
no. I didn't. I take that. Nope.
You just said that a spider's a bug. Next game on the list, my number 26. There are two sort of trunks to the to train games, two sort of main ways you can go: 18xx or Steam. This is my number 26, Age of Steam, designed by Martin Wallace. So there are a lot of reasons I love Steam, Age of Steam, or Steam games. The tightness of it's a very confrontational. At least the vanilla Steam is very confrontational. The board is very tight. What sets Steam train games apart from 18xx is there's less of a stock market part of it. So Steam is more about building the routes, and there's also a pick up and deliver aspect to Steam games that you don't find in 18xx games. Another thing I really like about Age of Steam is the number of boards. There are hundreds of different types of boards. You can play, like the vanilla board is, I think, North America, but you can play, different parts of the world. There's a Heaven and Hell board. There's like a zombie board, and they all, have the same structure, but they play a lot differently. But yeah, just vanilla Steam, very confrontational, very tactical but strategic. You want to make sure your routes don't get cut off, but you need to adapt to when they do, or you need to adapt when different goods come on the board. It may not be. It probably wouldn't be the game I would recommend for people playing their first train game. I think I would recommend some of the 18xx introductory games, but it's a really, really good one. That is Age of Steam, my number 26 game.
And is this the simpler version? I remember Steam and Age of Steam.
Steam is the more straightforward version.
So this is the more complicated system.
Yeah, but only a little bit, only slightly so. But yeah, and I might. I've played Age of Steam more than Steam. I might, with more plays of Steam, prefer that. But yeah, both types of games are good ones.
I think I played this once.
Yeah.
I seem to remember liking it, but
okay.
I'm not a train Baron.
Right.
My number 25 game is Blue Lagoon. This is, like I said, like you said, rather a 2018 game. This is the second of 3 2018 games on my list. And yeah, like it's shot up through my list because it's that good.
Yeah.
My recollection of sort of discovering Blue Lagoon is when we brought it back from Gen Con and I sort of read through the rules cursory and I'm like, I don't get why this is going to be good at all. It seems a little too abstract, a little bit too simple. But man, it's satisfying. Like the number of different ways you can score. Like I sort of, anyone tends to like sort of pick the one or two that they're gonna not maybe focus on that round, and it seems like you can easily do well just by not necessarily focusing on everything,
right.
And you can adjust that game to game based on sort of like what other players are doing. I haven't played through the desert. I'm sure I would enjoy it as well. But Blue Lagoon is fantastic. For a game that's as simple as it is, the 2-round structure is interesting because the first round sets up for the second one. Great game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Blue Lagoon.
Just a note that we are now officially halfway through our 50 games. Little commemoration.
Yeah.
What are you going to do to celebrate?
I was trying to remember what I usually say. Is it woohoo or yippee? It's some form.
Yeah, some. Yeah.
All right, jumping into my 25th best game of all time. This is a second edition of a game, and there is a first edition of the game that many people prefer, but I have not played. And this is a Martin Wallace game. This is a Study in Emerald, second edition. This is a deck building, hidden teams Cthulhu game. I hate Cthulhu. I could not care any less about Cthulhu. I think there might be one or two themes that I dislike more, but barely. In this game, there are two teams, and those two teams, you don't know who they are. They could be 2v1. It could be 1v2. It's better to play where it could be 2v3 or 3v3. But as you're taking actions on the board, you're either trying to help Cthulhu or not. I don't even understand the mythos, to be honest with you. Either you like Cthulhu or you want him dead. Those are the only two things I know. And as you score points for doing actions on the board, your player piece moves up, even if you're on the other team. So people don't know, even if you do something that's bad for Cthulhu and you're on Cthulhu's team, you move up in points. And then at the end of the game, those points are taken away from you. So there's a lot of paranoia about the points that people are earning because they could be just sort of putting on a show for you to try to hide who they are. You never want your teammate to be too far behind you in points. So there's a lot of hidden information, hidden objectives. The deck building in this game is not great, I would say. You're sort of moving around locations in London, I believe. And I think this is based off one specific story. And the first edition of A Study in Emerald is much more complicated, which I do not think would benefit the game, but maybe for those who love Cthulhu. I'm always on the lookout for games that deliver a unique experience that you can't get somewhere else. And A Study in Emerald feels like nothing else.
I really need to play this. I really.
I think you'd like it. I've only played it once, and I remember really, really liking it. But weirdly enough, I just don't remember so many of the specifics of what we were doing. I just remember the hidden team and the sort of the hidden victory points thing, and that was really, really cool.
You recommend the second edition or the first edition?
I have not played the first edition, but the second edition is a streamlined affair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
But you're only going to play it with me, right?
Sure.
So you wouldn't.
As long as there's no party boats in my future, then we're all set.
Good.
My number 25, I know came out in 2017 because it was the Board Game Mirage game of 2017. That is Sidereal Confluence, Trading and Negotiation in the Elysian Quadrant. Just rolls off the tongue. This is, as the title indicates, so poorly, I guess, a trading and negotiation game. But also with a very Euro aspect to it. There is tons of cubes, and you are definitely pushing cubes. You're pushing cubes not for area control or anything like that, but for resource conversion. The part that I love about this game is how much trading is encouraged. You play one of a number of asymmetric races. Again, asymmetry shows up a lot on my list. And you have different powers generally, but one of the things that you also that also differentiates you from the other races is the resources that you create versus the resources you need. You generally have an abundance in one resource, but you need one that you don't create. And so that's where the trading is encouraged, because it's the same for everybody at the table. They have a resource that they don't need and resources they do need. And it just, this game, there's no, I feel like one of the biggest problems with negotiation games is you always feel like you're being hurt, or you always feel like you could maximize things a little bit more. And with Sidereal Confluence, the trading is so free and encouraged and vital to the game that it's just, there's trading happening all the time. A lot of times you feel like you're getting a little bit less than you need, but the thing is, it's generally for resources that you have no use for. Like you're just pumping out brown cubes, which is great because you can trade them away, but you otherwise have no reason to have them. So you might as well trade them for something. And that's I think the core of this game and the thing I like so much about it. It's also great that it plays up to 7 players. We just had a 7-player game, and it doesn't, because the action is simultaneous. It's a constant trading thing. Playing 7 players does nothing but, I think, add to the enjoyment. It doesn't lengthen the game at all.
It took us 2 hours, which is as long as any other game I've played
especially for a 7-player game.
Yeah.
A 2-hour game for 7 players
absolutely.
is fantastic. So that's my number 25, the BGB game of 2017, Sidereal Confluence, trading and negotiating, in the Elysium Quadrants.
I really, really like Sidereal Confluence. I think I like it a little bit more than either of you to some extent. We'll come back to it.
Better.
Yeah. But the things I really like about it is, like, there is this idea of sort of mutual cooperation. Like it's in your interest to grow the table's economy.
Yes.
So you're never incentivized to lie to another player. In fact, you're hurt. You specifically cannot go back on a promise you've made without getting hurt.
Yeah.
Pretty significantly. So it ends up becoming it feels a little bit, maybe a bit friendlier than your average sort of trading game.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I never considered that. That's true, because you want, if you need white cubes, for example, you want the white cube player to produce more white cubes. That's interesting. I never considered that.
Yeah, it's definitely feels like you want more of everything at the table, because also then, you need to help the person that's producing white cubes by helping the person that's providing them the thing they need. You know what I mean? So it's just this big, cool. Everything is just blossoming and growing as the game progresses. Very cool game.
I love that you can trade part of your engine to another player for a turn. So it's sort of like, hey, I'm not going to use this, but I'll trade you like part of my spaceship, but you have to give it back next round in exchange for like 2 brown cubes. Right. Something so silly about that. That's great.
My number 24 is Alhambra. This kind of is a fantastic game. It also has a very special place for me because this is one of the earliest Euro games I played. So when I was first coming to the hobby, like before I play, I'd played Catan like once back forever ago, but Alhambra was one of the first games that introduced me to that sort of space of the hobby, and I really liked it a lot. I sort of played it almost every time I could get a chance. The way that this works is there are tiles that of different sort of suits, different colors of specific value, and they get allocated to one of 4 market slots of 4 different currency colors. You're collecting cards of specific currencies, and then on your turn you're either collecting cards to sort of add to your hand of currency, or spending them to buy one of those tiles. You then lay out those tiles sort of in your city, your Alhambra, and you're trying to get groups of tiles. There are also certain reasons you might want to, depending on the expansions and variants you're playing with, the arrangement of these might become significant. You're trying to connect walls and sort of routes so that they line up. There's like a tile laying spatial component to this, and there's just end up being multiple different considerations so that you have more of a specific color of suit than other players at the table. So there are 3 scoring rounds in the game that are sort of semi-randomly determined, it's a really satisfying game that I keep coming back to. I played it again recently a couple of times. It's still as satisfying as it's always been. It's a really, really cool game that has a ton of expansions that sort of add on little variants and little sort of rules to it. One of my favorite things about Alhambra is, an unofficial variant that we play called Speed Alhambra. Have you played this?
I have played it once, yeah.
So our friend Dan invented this variant where you don't lay out your tiles as you get them. You just accumulate them, and then you have a timed phase where you're forced to lay them all out in quick succession. That's not really my preferred way to play the game, but it's just a fun little twist in it that it tends to be the way we play it a lot these days. Yeah, that's very cool. That's Alhambra.
I love Alhambra. I love vanilla Alhambra.
Yeah.
I was like there's some friends of mine who were not gamers, and I try to like start getting them into the hobby. And I remember very vividly introducing them to Alhambra. It was the first like really Euro game that we played, like straight Euro game. And like again, some of them who went on to be more into gamers, like I remember that being a turning point where they're like, "Wow, this is really nice, really smooth and elegant, and really well designed." I love this game.
I'm actually kind of shocked that you guys both like this so much.
Oh, really?
This feels like one of the old Euro ugly games that has been like replaced 100 times over, and all the expansions is like the worst way to make expansions where it's like you can use 7 of 20 modules.
To be honest, I just love vanilla.
Even just the base game, yeah.
I'd love to play it again. I've only played it maybe 2 or 3 times.
I'm curious, like, what would you consider like the best replacement?
I mean, like I said, I played it like 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah, but that was my number 24, Alhambra.
It's my number 24. Has been sort of mentioned earlier. This is Insider. Insider. Oh, it's another Oink game. Oops. I thought that I'm on the same. I'm in Oink land.
I wonder how high Werewords is going to be on your list.
Yeah, Werewords is not on the list.
Weird. It's better.
Yeah. Insider is the distillation of the idea of playing 20 questions with a pseudo hidden traitor. You know, as a 12-year-old on long road trips where everyone's playing 20 questions, and sometimes I question whether 20 questions by itself is even like really a fun game. But we played it a lot growing up. Insider is a small box version of this concept. It's been expanded upon by Werewords. Neelan and I will obviously disagree on which version of this game you should get, but the premier concept is quite interesting, which is what kind of questions can you ask someone that subtly leads them towards the right path without being too obvious. And sometimes you say a question and it's just so clear that was way too obvious, and then everyone starts pointing fingers at you, and that's the fun of Werewords and Insider, and these are both great games.
Yeah, there'll always be a time where I'll sort of like advocate for purity, but I think Insider sort of rides this line of being a little too simple in the box, and I think Werewords just gives it that little twist that I like.
But you also can't explain how a game of Werewords works.
That's fair. Yeah.
That's on tape. The thing I like about Insider is how, like, part of the whole Oink thing, the fact that you can take it, put it in your pocket, and it doesn't take a big table presence either, so you can play it anywhere, which is not the case with Werewords.
That's true.
Okay. My number 24. This is the only Splendor game on my list. This is the Great Zimbabwe. The biggest criticism, I think, of Great Zimbabwe, like most Splendor games, is how opaque it is and how punishing Splendor games can be. I think Great Zimbabwe is much less punishing than Food Chain. And also because it's like a pretty small operation Splendor, the component quality is lacking. That said, there's a lot that I really, really love about Great Zimbabwe. First of all, the theme is really cool. African tribes. It's a not often used theme. The artwork, for as sparse as it is, I like. I think it's cool and evocative. There's the auction mechanic where you're auctioning off first player. Come to think of it, actually, the auction mechanic is very similar to the first player mechanic in Age of Steam. What you're doing is you're bidding on who gets to be first player, and basically the longer that you're willing to bid and stay in the auction, the more that resources accumulate on the cards that represent the first player. So basically, you can trade off being first player, but you'll get less resources to start the round. It's a really nice way of doing it. The game itself, I love it because it's really unique. Actually, although I think the bones of the game were borrowed by Isaac Childress's founders of Gloomhaven. But before that, it was quite unique in that you are trying to build a logistical network. The point of the game is that you're trying to build these. I think they're idols, and in order to build them, you need to have your reach to different resources all along the board, be it your own or others, and you can sort of buy other players' resources, but you need to be able to reach them. It's just a very interesting spatial. There's a lot of games that are spatial, but this does it in a unique way. This whole like networking thing is unique. But the reason I like this more than any is the asymmetric powers in this game. They are crazy. They're all over the place. And they're of varying degrees. There are some that are much better than others. But the way this game makes up for powers being much better than others is that when you when you buy a power, when you elect to purchase a power, it comes with a cost, but also with an adjustment to how many victory points you need to win, because this is a race game. You're racing to a certain number of victory points. At the beginning of the game, everybody starts with the same number that is going to be the winning score. But when you elect to take a power that makes you have much stronger abilities, you are that target for you specifically is moved up. Now instead of trying to get 20 points, now you're up 26 or something. So it balances a very strong power with moving you up the victory point track, or moving up your target on the victory point track. But I love it because you sort of, obviously that's a balance. Like, is this power good enough to make it that I need to like now score more victory points? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But hey, what if I add it to this power? Now it's going to cost me even more to more victory points to win. But I think this combination more than makes up for it. I just love that. I'm sure it's used in other games, but just that moving target is I just love that part of it. So for me, number 24, my favorite Splendor, the Great Zimbabwe.
I had a very bad first game of the Great Zimbabwe, which I think colored my perception of it a lot. But interestingly, I had a very bad first game of Food Chain Magnate.
Right.
And I came out of that feeling really strongly about it.
Right.
So I don't know what that says specifically. I think I should try the Great Zimbabwe again.
Yeah.
It's
fairly. I think our game went long, but I think it generally can go fairly short.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to do it again.
If its bones are in Founders of Gloomhaven, I don't think that I should. I think I need not participate in this game night.
Yeah.
My number 23 game is Patchwork. This is one of my favorite pure two-player games. Mark spoke earlier about the sort of the Tetris puzzle thing that Uwe Rosenberg's games are now sort of, I think, mostly leaning towards. I feel like he does a lot of those these days. Patchwork is is this the first one that they use that component? Right.
In fact, Patchwork came out of him designing Feast for Odin. So he was designing Feast for Odin, and he had this whole thing, this Tetris thing, and he decided to just make a game.
That's very cool. Yeah. So Patchwork, you just have a sort of a circle of Tetris puzzle pieces, as it were, and each of them costs 2 different resources, or buttons, which you're collecting over the course, and time. So your time track is sort of slowly whittling down until the end of the game. You choose how much time you want to spend and how many buttons. You take that tile and you just try to place it on your grid. You're trying to create for one thing, a 7x7 grid to get bonus points at some point. The first person to do that gets some bonus points. And also any sort of spots uncovered are, like in Feast for Odin, negative points at the end of the game. So you're just trying to cover as much of your board as possible before both players run out of time. The sort of the time and button economy is quite good for a game this simple. And the puzzle component is just so satisfying to me, at least. Like if you like Tetris and those sort of style of games, there's just something so satisfying about filling that sort of spot perfectly on your board. It's a very, very simple game. It's a game I've had a lot of success teaching anyone basically how to play. It's probably, I'm trying to think, maybe my favorite 2-player game that's purely 2 players. That is Patchwork.
Yeah, just for me, the 2-player thing always is like a negative, but otherwise.
Yeah, I obviously that makes it limited. And actually, interestingly, like I think his later evolutions of this, like Cottage Garden, expand the game, make it slightly heavier, and take it to 4 players. Yeah. But
you lose the purity.
Yeah, even having played Cottage Garden, I think the purity of Patchwork keeps pulling me back.
I'd rather play with bears in parks than
Yeah, that
Quilting.
was funny. I thought about Baron Park, but it didn't make my list. Like Patchwork is
I don't like the button economy part of it. I like the fitting the piece on the board, but sort of math solving the other part of it is dull for me, or in comparison.
Yeah.
Cool. My number 23 is a game that has already been mentioned. That game is Splendor. Splendor is a very simple efficiency game where you're buying cards that then improve your ability to buy other cards. The theme makes no sense. You have really cool poker chips. If I'm waiting around with a group of Euro-minded players looking for something to do until something else happens, Splendor will always be the game that I go to. There are other games like Century Spice Road that sort of came in to claim this throne. They did not. They're not as good. Splendor is fantastic for what it is, but it is relatively themeless and sort of, you know what you're getting into when you play Splendor, but it's just always fun. I've never had a bad game of Splendor.
Splendor's a great game. Obviously, yeah, definitely. Okay, for my number 23, this is by Reiner, but not Knizia. This is Reiner Stockhausen. It's mentioned earlier.
Have you been planning this joke?
I just come up with
Is it in your notes?
I've filled.
it's written out, not by.
Yeah, this time.
Okay, got it.
But so this is mentioned earlier. This is Orléans. Bag builder. Neelan spoke about it, so I won't talk too much about it. We do generally, I think, like pure forms of games, and you know, we like that games when they're like in their vanilla, their base being their ideal situation, and vanilla Orleans is fine, but I do love the expansions and how crazy they are. Like when I heard there was a expansion that made Orleans co-op, it was crazy to me, but it works. And the trade and intrigue with the new main board, I think, is fantastic, and the buildings that it offers and the other ways to play is fantastic. But yeah, this is my favorite bag builder. The same Ryan Stockhausen also did Altiplano. I thought that went a little too long, although I like some parts of it. But no, yeah, 23 for me, Orléans.
Okay. My number 22 game is one we've already spoken about, is Rainer Knizia, Taj Mahal. I love Taj Mahal. Like again, like I remember back to when I was first getting into Eurogames, and Taj Mahal, I think very early on, was one I would have called my favorite Eurogame at that point in time, at least. It really connects to me really quickly. I loved how, you know, how interactive it felt, and sort of how relatively simple it is, but sort of how complex the decisions are, and sort of also just how, again, this is going to be maybe a recurring theme, how bad sometimes it feels when you're sort of close to a thing and you maybe come away from a round with nothing. It's can be harsh at times, but it's a really, really satisfying game. Yeah, I think we covered Taj Mahal pretty comprehensively on the previous episodes. I won't say too much more about it, except to say, again, it's just been reprinted and that new version looks fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, if you're looking for a Rainer Knizia game that's, you know, that's very well regarded and readily available right now, Taj Mahal.
All right. My number 22 best game of all time is Decrypto. Decrypto is a fantastic word game. We have gone over it. It doesn't feel like Codenames, but it fits into the same genre, but it's a little bit more advanced. It is really hard to teach people. I now am sort of pseudo famous for just basically refusing to teach it, and or just saying we're going to play a round and you'll understand how to play by the end of the round. Players will be like, but no, explain this, and I won't do it at all. But it's super fun. It makes you think in a different way than any other word game to this point has for me, and it spreads out who's the leader of a round. So in Codenames, you're sort of the guy on the hot seat, while the rest of your team, so you can sort of lead them to destruction. If you're bad, your team will lose. Whereas in Decrypto, it's a little bit more spread out, that the whole team is sort of working together, and it changes who's giving the clues each round, which is something that I like about Decrypto. It's great.
And that's our first triple crossover, is that right?
Maybe, yeah, I think so.
Triple crossover. I don't know. Is that like a high five, or sort of? Is it under the table? We sort of.
Well, we're doing a lot of stuff under the table.
Yeah.
Let's not mention that. My number 22 is the last co-op game on my list. My favorite co-op game of all time. This is by Nikki Valens. It is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. I like Kellen, although not as vehemently as Kellen. I'm not really a big fan of the Cthulhu, Eldritch Horror, Arkham Horror thing. It's fine, but it doesn't really do anything too much for me. Specifically, like the Eldritch Horror and Arkham Horror, those games I think are a little too fiddly, a little too long, a little too dice rolly. And what's funny is like Mansions of Madness has all those, has Cthulhu, has dice rolling, has fiddliness, but it all works so well. And again, Kellen's going to give me flack for this, but it's because of the app. The app integration with Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition is fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. It's super intuitive. All the fiddly bits are on the app. You don't have to worry about where they are. You just know intuitively where they're going to be. The narration is even great. The stories in this game are great. Another hallmark of the horror games that is in this game that I just love is the whole idea of insanity. So your character can die in one of two ways. They can die because they've been hit and they lose their hit points, or they can go insane if they lose too much mental sanity, which is again in a lot of Cthulhu games. But when it comes to this game, when you go insane, you don't die. You just dealt a card, and that card, and you read this secretly. The game is co-op, but it may not be co-op when somebody goes insane, because now they have a different. Maybe they have a different victory condition. It might just say you're fine. Your victory condition is the same as other characters, but again, you can't tell them. So they're always now looking at you suspiciously because they think you might do something crazy, because you might do something crazy because your victory condition now could be to burn the place down, or your victory condition could be to kill another character. This again, like Dungeon Fighter, which is my number 50 game, this also has led to some of the best moments in gaming that I've ever had. I was playing a game where it was a struggle the entire game. We were just fighting till the end. One of the characters had gone insane. We were all starting to go insane or get near death. But we got to the very end of this campaign. We were literally we were about to beat the last person, and we were again all like near death. And then Andreas was playing, and he was like going to be the next player to play. But before him, it was our insane character who, again, had been playing normal. We thought probably she'd gotten something that wasn't going to be. And then she just says, I stab Andreas. And it was like, and that was her win condition, that if she'd killed somebody and he was near death. And it was just like everybody, it was like, it should have been a deflating moment because we had fought so much and only to lose on that turn. But instead, like everybody just like loved it. It was like so fun and crazy and like such a twist. But yeah, Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition is fantastic. A great like spooky Halloween sort of game.
One of my favorite board games of all time is Half-Life 2. Specifically the VR mode. The narration in it is great. The graphics are super good. I love everything about this board game. You should buy it. That's Half-Life 2.
Oh my God. So help me. If you have any game that could possibly use an app, I am going to.
No, but the VR and the narration, don't forget that. Don't forget those
to be
components.
clear, there is no VR in Match.
But not yet.
Not yet,
Yeah,
right. So we can only hope.
Edition 3. Okay, my number 21 game is Android Netrunner. I feel like talking about collectible card games on a list like this is always a really complicated affair because you're not just buying into a standalone game, you're sort of buying into like a lifestyle to some extent. Like if you're not keeping up with the meta, you're almost not playing the game as intended.
Neelan, the meta's dead.
It is. It absolutely is dead, and tragically too. Android Netrunner is I don't know what the right way to describe this. So it was originally designed by Richard Garfield, but then Fantasy Flights re-engineered it, I think, for this new living card game release. I don't know how different or similar it is to the original, but the way this works is there are two asymmetric, not factions, but each player. It's a two-player game. One player is playing the corporation. One player is playing the runner, who's sort of like a hacker. There are a bunch of different factions on either side, but each side has completely different goals. Corporations are sort of trying to sort of secretly install these agendas into their servers, which are these rows of cards. And the hackers are sort of trying to run on those servers and uncover them. So that you're sort of setting up firewalls as the corporations of cards that will block each of these columns. And the runner is sort of using like sort of tools and gear cards to sort of like divert themselves around firewalls, get to the servers, and hopefully uncover the corporation's agendas. The first player to get to a certain number of points, either by sort of escalating their agendas as the corporation or uncovering the agendas as the hacker, the runner, wins the game. That sort of intense asymmetry, like how differently each side plays, is one of my favorite things about it. Because essentially, in a tournament environment, you would have your runner deck and you would have your corporation deck, and you'd play games with both of them. It's a very strongly thematic game with beautiful art. It's like a cyberpunk, bright, colorful theme. It's a game that I was sort of playing for like I would say certainly not for the life of the thing. I played it for a few cycles and I just fell off of it because it's, even in the living card game format where you're getting all of the cards every expansion, it's a lot to keep up with. It's a game that I definitely wanted to have on my list because of how strongly I felt about when I was playing it. I wish it was still around. I know they just released a new core right before they killed the game entirely, so that feels tragic. I hope it comes back in some form. That's Android Netrunner.
This is one that I always sort of wish I played because it sounds really interesting and it sounds very rich.
Yeah.
But that whole needing to keep up is
I think one of the things I've sort of been leaning towards trying is just net decking sort of 2 strong competitive starter decks, as it were, and just keeping those in my collection. Maybe getting rid of every other card and being like, let's play Netrunner with these sort of generic decks to give you a feel for what this is, and just do that.
And just so you know, the pedigree of this game is Richard Garfield, who's famous for having designed Keyforge. So that is something to be really excited about.
That's a good one.
Not
as good as my Reiner joke, but hey.
Well, I also didn't write it before I came here.
Well, that's preparation. The audience, both studio and appreciate preparation.
My number 21 best game of all time is a Karl Chudyk design. This is Glory to Rome.
Okay. My number 21 game of all time is a Karl Chudyk design. It is Glory to Rome.
Whoa.
Look at that. Yeah. We can put aside our differences and talk about Glory to Rome.
Well, you have bullet points.
Of course. I got bullet points for everything. You want bullet points? I got bullet points.
Glory to Rome is a fantastic multi-use card game.
I agree.
Oh, jeez. The base engine of it feels really tight and just the right amount of complicated. And then what the cards do once you build them goes off the deep end in terms of crazy wackiness.
Got that right here.
Which I love because you're playing this game where you're sort of trying to take actions and then benefit off of other people taking those actions, and you're sort of building up this little empire, but then you get a card that just allows you to completely, there's certain cards that are like, if you build this, you win the game.
Right, yeah.
And so it's just a race, watching the game sort of unravel and where is it going to break first. And that's so fun and sort of typifies a Karl Chudyk design, but sort of that base system. He's actually tried to make other versions of this, Matainai, and then there's a
Impulse. Is that the same?
Impulse has some similarities, but there's other designers who've made import and export as sort of cribbed part of this system, which feels so great. I really like Glory to Rome. I have the sort of beautiful black box edition, which is one of the, I think, most famous board game Kickstarter snafus of all time.
Right.
Would you guys agree that it sort of has a San Juan, from the card game based in Puerto Rico? It has that sort of feeling.
It's right here. He's reading my lines.
I'm sorry. I just want to be part of the conversation. I felt.
Oh wait, did you actually steal it?
Literally.
Yeah, it's more complicated than that, and it's there's more chaos injected.
But you would agree
San
that's a
Juan.
good point.
I would agree that you have a good bullet point there.
Yeah, I actually haven't played Glory to Rome. I really want to. I played Matainai, which is, I believe, similar.
Yeah.
But everyone says Glory to Rome is better.
Matainai in comparison is shorter, perhaps more refined, and also just substantially more complicated because the theme doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Where Glory to Rome, it's like, okay, you're building a stone building, get some stone, and in Matainai, I don't know what the hell you're doing.
Opening a shop or whatever. I really like what you're talking about, the game-breaking cards. I love when you get one of those game-breaking cards and you suddenly think to yourself, how can I get this on the table? You start moving your entire strategy to this one game-breaking situation. I echo what Kellen said. He hit everything on my bullets list. So Glory to Rome is my number 21 as well.
I couldn't agree more.
So that is going to do it for our lists, and that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in, whether you were on YouTube or listening to the podcast. We are going to come back next week with our 20 to 11. If you're listening to us on the podcast, why not go on YouTube and check out our the video version, and you can see this back and forth in true color.
Yeah.
I'm trying my best not to like squint at you guys, because usually when we're recording the podcast, I can just sort of make faces at you or make my displeasure sort of known.
Yeah, sometimes you don't even face us. Sometimes you just record looking away from us. But yeah, no, thank you so much for listening and watching. As always, you can follow us on the various forms of social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you're looking, we'll be there. We're on Reddit as well. There's a lot of discussion on our guild, which is at boardgamebarrage.com / heaven forbid / guild. So boardgamebarrage.com / guild to find our guild on BGG. And until next week, when we get to the finest of the fine, 22 and number 11, we will see you guys then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.